it got me thinking of like a lot of my clients, like they will literally say like, I am too old. Like people will think I'm too old, or like my accent, like I have a really strong accent. Like I can't create video content in my accent, or like often what you mentioned, Mike, of like people not seeing kind of how they want to show up. So they're like, then this is just not for me. Like this is only for a select amount of people. And I think that almost shows how it's even more important for us to show up exactly as we are, because there's probably someone looking for someone like us on the other side of it.
Welcome back to Waves, powered by Arcade, a show for marketers, creators, and entrepreneurs who want to stop chasing the tide and start making waves online. We're your hosts, Mike and Mitzi, and today we're joined by content marketing expert Natasha Pierre.
Natasha is the host of the Shine Online podcast, part of the HubSpot podcast network, and is a video marketing coach for small businesses. Through her signature group programs and educational content, Natasha helps you build your brand with a confident video marketing strategy that ultimately grows your business, community, and impact simultaneously. We're so excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Natasha.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I don't know if I mentioned it to either of you, but I've been a longtime listener of the show, so this is such a treat for me.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I have been a longtime listener of the show too, so this is a treat for me.
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm honestly trying to remember when we first discovered your show. I want to say, was it through, Mitzi, do you remember, was it through Taylor Loren or someone like that? Later, maybe?
Yeah. It might have been in later. Like, I think that they were like highlighting podcasts to listen to. And I think that was at least when I discovered your podcast. And yeah, it's been so good. Especially as like I've been trying to do more video content. And I just feel like you're such a pro at that. And just even like the mindset behind creating videos. So I'm so excited to talk to you about that.
Yeah. We're going to dive right on in.
Yeah, well, before we dive on in, I was going to say I had an absolute blast talking about threads with you on the Thinkific webinar a few weeks ago. And I have to ask, are you still using threads?
Yes, such a great question. In this current moment, no, I am not currently using threads, and I'm sure we'll talk about like sustainable content burnout, like how to actually not get overwhelmed. Like I'm sure that'll be a theme today, but transparently for the season that I'm in, I had to focus on my non-negotiables, and threads is the new one. So it definitely didn't fall under non-negotiables, but definitely plan on, picking it back up, being back on the app. I'm sure it's going to be a long game, but long story short, taking a little threads break.
Yeah, I haven't been as intentional about it, but I also just haven't been as active. I feel like, and that's probably the story for a lot of people. I feel like just as they're working through this like beta version of the app, even giving it a little bit of time probably isn't the worst thing, because they're just going to have better features and people are going to get more active again as they start to see more of their actual friends and stuff like that.
Definitely.
Yeah, we want to get into video, and you don't just do video, you're literally doing it all online, including podcasting, video marketing, coaching, speaking, educating. So we want to just talk about how you landed in the content creation space in the first place, and even more specifically, how did you initially choose your niche?
Yeah, definitely. So when I started my business, it was actually as a social media management business. So I kind of started doing a little bit under the sun because I started my business while I was in college. So I was like, let me take all the skills I know and do digital marketing as a whole. And then eventually I landed on social media, and then eventually I landed on Instagram, and then Instagram naturally became stories, IGTV, reels, lives. And I just fell in love with video for storytelling. And so while I was doing it behind the scenes for a lot of my clients, initially I was like, I'll just be behind the scenes. Like I won't even start my own Instagram account. I don't need to be creating content. But then eventually I started slowly showing up on my platforms, and I started talking about the things that I was going through with my clients about batching and about them being nervous to be in video and all those different elements. And so it's funny when I look at like my little story archives and I look back years ago of what I was creating my first video videos about is I was like slowly building my niche of video content and my approach to video. Like I talk a lot about like low lift video content and creating like B-roll footage. And that was something I was doing ages ago before reels were even a thing. So I think it's really cool to look at your journey of like what you've been able to do in your career, even if my career wasn't very long, right? I was right out of college. I didn't have a lot of experience, but from the experience I did have and like experimenting and just sharing what I was interested in, it actually doesn't look too different from what I'm doing now, even though I'm no longer doing social media management and now have my hands in like a lot of different types of content buckets. So it's been really fun to let my brand evolve in that way, but still stay true to my roots.
Yeah. And I love that because I think a lot of people get so busy and focused, and there's nothing wrong with focus, but they get so busy doing their actual work that they forget to kind of like stop and share some of it or kind of like just be open to talking about it. I think one thing I love about you is like I've been following you for a while and just seeing that you like share so much of what you're doing and building and growing, and it's also fun to like be along for the ride with you. But a lot of people kind of get hung up, and there's a lot of reasons why they get hung up, which I know we'll get into, but it's just so cool that you like stopped to also share some of that from the beginning. So it's just a nice natural evolution for you in terms of like the work you're doing now.
Definitely. Yeah. And it wasn't easy to at first. I think it's really easy for people that are doing the creating for others to not actually want to be in the content. But I think that it allowed me to eventually create my own brand outside of the offer that I had. It allowed me to like very seamlessly transition out of social media management and start like working with brands and start speaking and start like creating all this different type of content. So I think like for anyone that's listening and they're like, I don't want to be in the content, I know that's something I wish I would have heard of like, wow, when I'm able to show up in that way, it really unlocks so many opportunities for you.
Totally. Awesome. Well, I'm so excited because we're going to talk about 5 mindset blocks that people have when it comes to creating video content. I feel like this is going to be like therapy for me because I really want to do more video content, but some of these like mind blocks really just like, it's so hard to get over them. So I'm so excited to learn from you when it comes to these mindset blocks. So we're going to dive into the first one, and that is perfectionism, which I definitely struggle with. I'm sure so many creators struggle with it. Can you talk us through what your experience has been like dealing with perfectionism, or any tips that you use to help clients with that?
Yes, definitely. And I think this is one of the biggest video blocks. And the reason why we're talking about mindset is it's so easy to talk a lot about strategy, and we'll touch on strategy. But what I find with so many business owners, and I've worked with so many different types, that like 20% of the problem is actually like strategy, but the other 80% is their mindset and how they're approaching it. And when it comes to perfectionism, there's really 3 different types of ways that it shows up. There's the appearance perfectionism of my office or my home is a mess, or I'm not really done up today, or I look really tired, or I haven't done my hair right. Like the list can go on, or even just being insecure about our appearance. And then it can also be like the performance of our content. Like, oh, if it didn't go well, or if I didn't get engagement, or all these things didn't happen from just one piece of content, then it wasn't perfect. It wasn't worth posting. I want to archive it, right? Like, I think we've all done that before. And then there's like the actual content of like, it's not perfectly edited, or I didn't get the lip sync right, or I didn't say something perfect to camera, or whatever, like the lighting wasn't great. We can like nitpick our content and ourselves and our content, and all from the best intention of we are creating brands as creators, as business owners, and we want to represent our best selves, right? We want to create content that's worth people's time. And that's really where this idea of perfectionism comes from. But I think what really helped me is realizing that perfectionism doesn't actually help us create better video content. Right? Like perfectionism is actually the block that's in between us just like actually showing up consistently and actually just posting the story, no matter what the lighting looks like and no matter what our background looks like. And when I actually think about imperfect content, is that's the type of content that connects us with people. Like we're at the end of the day not trying to connect with brands. We're trying to connect with other people on this other side of these social media apps. And so when I'm showing up exactly as I am, people are able to like connect with those things and build relationships. And I think like through all the things we've gone through over the past 3 years and gone through it literally on social media, it's shown that people weren't looking for perfectionism. They were just looking for real people to connect with. And I think that's really where the authenticity comes in, right? Of like show up authentically. But I really think it means like just show up exactly as you are, real, unperfect, knowing that you can still get results, you can still build community, you can still get growth on the other side of that. And from my own personal experience, I remember because I started my business so young, I had just so many thoughts if I wanted to look older and look like there were more people in part of my business. And like I literally felt like I had to put a button-down shirt on when I was going on stories. Like this is like a true story. I was like, I'm pulling out the button-down shirt every time I was on stories. And of course, there's nothing wrong with button-down shirts. But now if you look at my content, like I'm in my matcha, I'm in my comfy home clothes, like I'm walking around in my garden, like I'm just being fully me without feeling like I need to perform or look a certain way to do that. So this block is a really, really tough one, but getting through it really can help you just like start being more consistent with your content.
That hit hard.
Seriously. And Natasha, I wasn't following you at the beginning because I didn't know about you yet, but even from how you were describing how you got started and found your niche and like the process you went through, plus the way you've described this, I just feel like everything that you do is so true. I don't know how else to say it. And I feel like that is really the best way to create consistency and like sustainability is like if you're being actually who you are and showing up in the clothes you would actually be wearing and just talking the way that you would actually be talking and not worrying so much about polish and just taking people along for the ride. Like that's the kind of content, one, people actually like and engage with. And it's obvious with the way that you've grown. But two, it allows you to just feel more comfortable approaching that next video or whatever it is because you feel like you can just be honest. So that's inspiring for me because I think Mitzi does way more video content than I do, and I've just kind of avoided it at all costs. Well, not at all costs. I participate in some, but it's what's kept me from doing more video for myself and my own content just because I also just feel like there aren't as many guys creating content, and I don't really have a lot of examples of like men that I like their content that I would want to emulate elements of it. And so it really kind of feels like this no man's land of defining it for myself. So this is a good reminder for me that I can literally just be me, and it doesn't have to look a certain way or sound a certain way, but whatever comes easiest and most natural. And I think that's probably what a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I love how you shared that personally. I'm sorry to interrupt a little bit, but it got me thinking of like a lot of my clients, like they will literally say like, I am too old. Like people will think I'm too old, or like my accent, like I have a really strong accent. Like I can't create video content in my accent, or like often what you mentioned, Mike, of like people not seeing kind of how they want to show up. So they're like, then this is just not for me. Like this is only for a select amount of people. And I think that almost shows how it's even more important for us to show up exactly as we are, because there's probably someone looking for someone like us on the other side of it.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. And I think what you said about like perfectionism, it actually holds you back from creating content. Like for me, when I think about perfectionism and it's like not wanting to post something that isn't exactly what I want it to look like in my head. And I almost like in my head romanticize that because I'm like, my standards are so high, but it means that I'm not posting, it means that I'm like not working that muscle and I'm holding back and I'm not getting to that level of quality or storytelling. Like it's even further away from me because I'm not trying to get there. So I think that was a really good unblock for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, when you said that perfectionism doesn't actually make it better, it just makes it take longer. Like that was a mic drop moment. Oh man, so good. The other one we wanted to talk about was overwhelm. And we see this a lot with clients. I'm sure you do in the way that you deliver your service. So we want to know, similar to perfectionism, how do you coach people through when they feel overwhelmed with what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And I think overwhelm can encompass so many things. I mean, that's what makes it overwhelming, right? There's the algorithms, there's the hashtags. How often am I supposed to be posting? What is my grid supposed to look like? Do I have enough time? Like, there's also this really deeply rooted assumption, I don't know where we all got it from, of like video has to be hard and draining and expensive and take a lot of my time and resources. Or also just like feeling like I need to know what's trending and what's hot right now and what's going to help me go viral, right? I feel like when we put all of that together, that is what makes us all overwhelmed, and rightfully so, because when we're trying to perfectly balance everything, we can be obsessed with figuring out what's the right formula, what's the right way to do things. And as someone who has been a strategist, I've been a coach, I've also done the social media management, I've been behind the scenes seeing out like what actually works and what's, trying all the things. And it's not saying those things don't work, but in the grand scheme of things, they really don't matter, especially if they're preventing us from actually creating content on a consistent basis for our communities and for our audiences. And what I found, the shift that helped me, because I used to be obsessive, like what was the latest feature, or like, okay, I need to post this trend right away when it's happening, or I need to try to be posting every day, right? Of realizing that when we obsess over those little things, that doesn't help us actually create content sustainably. What actually helps us create content sustainably, which I feel like we've already kind of touched on, is like creating content that you actually enjoy, that you like creating content that you don't have to perform to do. Like you can just put your phone up and like create the content. And also doing what you can maintain, of being honest with our capacities, right? There are people that are side hustlers, our parents are like have whole careers and businesses, right? We all have something we can just like show like proof of that it's taking our time and energy and capacity, where we can't just like tinker on our phones all day, right? But I think it's really important to understand that when we focus on what we like, what we actually can maintain, what will get us closer to our goals, and what also just leans into our own unique strengths and what gets us excited about social media, those are actually the factors that matter, not if you put hashtags in the comments or in your actual post, or not if you like posted every day 3 reels and 4 story slides and go live every month, right? So I think when we realize that all those things don't matter, we can kind of create our own cadence and flow. And that's what really allows us to maintain social media long term, right? Like I kind of already mentioned at the beginning, like I'm not on Threads. And because when I think about my sustainable posting plan right now, I know what my non-negotiables are, of like, I know I'm going to be on my stories, I'm going to be on my podcast, I'm going to be posting maybe once to my feed a week. And that might not sound like a lot of content, right? Because we hear we have to be posting multiple times a day and this crazy amount of content, but that's what I can sustain long term. So I'm not constantly burning out and then neglecting my audience and then not knowing how to get back into the swing of things. And we've all been in that cycle of like, you post a lot and then you ghost and then you're like, how do I get back into it? So I feel like that shift has been really freeing for me, and definitely for a lot of the people in my community as well.
Yeah, that's so good. I wanted to ask the overwhelm question because I had a follow-up that really speaks to my experience creating content so far. Like I said, I don't do a lot of video yet, but I do a lot of written content because that's just easier for me. But it can still feel overwhelming, more on the side of like doing the research around the content that you're sharing. And I wanted to ask you that question, whether it's for video or written or whatever context. What does the like research or like prep process look like for you when you're getting ready to post on a specific topic or share something educational or more like thought leadership-y?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love to kind of start with an idea of just like brainstorming what the idea is, what I have to bring to the table, like what do I want to cover? And then from there, I kind of like to map it out into like a rough outline, because I think from an outline, it can become literally any type of content. And so from there, that's where I like to get the bits and pieces of research or information, or even referencing like, I know I want to add this type of footage in the mix, or I want to add this visual, or I want to reference this, or I want to get all those different types of elements. So I find starting with an overwhelm versus like having to fully create the entire thing with all those details is what helps it kind of be a little less overwhelming for me. And something else that I think has been really helpful is giving myself space to actually like create, of having space to get into the flow state and like have fun with the task that we all know just comes so easy to us, and like we can just like jam out, which everyone's different, right? Some people might love writing, some people might love like editing's my favorite thing, and people are like, you are crazy. I hate editing. That's my favorite part about the process, right? So we're all different. But then there's also like those sprint tasks, right? Of like the things you have to do to create the content that we don't like doing. So for me, I like to try to give myself the space to sprint it out in an environment that I know I'm most productive. So like, I know I'm not productive in the afternoons and evenings. So I love cranking those types of things out first thing in my day and like blocking off focus time for that. So I know I kind of got into like more productivity, but those are some things that have been really helpful for me.
Yeah, definitely. I could see that. I feel like I've been experimenting, trying to figure out what works. And I could definitely see having that space that's uninterrupted in a creative environment to just like push it all out as much as possible. And even having a bit of a time limit, even though you're creating space, still have like, make sure it's finite, I feel like that is definitely beneficial for me, knowing that I can't just do endless amounts of research. And I think this probably translates to the next point, which is imposter syndrome. But I think a lot of the times it's out of this fear that someone's going to poke a hole in like my point of view on a specific topic, and I'm going to look kind of silly or something like that. But talk to us about imposter syndrome. It's obviously something that literally everyone can relate to if they're doing anything outside of their comfort zone. But how do you see it when it comes specifically to video content?
Yes, definitely. And I think it actually intertwines a lot with perfectionism. But really what imposter syndrome and how does it look when it comes to our video content? Things I commonly hear that might resonate with people listening is like video just feels cringy, right? Like you just like feel like being in video, creating video content, like the ultimate cringe factor. There's also the thought of like, I have nothing of value to share, right? Like our social media platforms are so saturated. What do I have to add? What do I have to share? There's also the thought from businesses of like, I don't want to sell too much. I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want to bore people. I don't want to rub people the wrong way, right? That can go in a lot of different ways. But I think at the end of the day is that we have to trust ourselves as experts. And something that a mentor told me once that's always stuck with me is like, if you know something more than someone else, then it's worth sharing. And so I think when we can take that approach of content is like, not every piece of content needs to be groundbreaking. Honestly, our best pieces of content can be so simple, yet be really, really effective. And also, Mike, you kind of mentioned this with kind of introducing us to imposter syndrome, of realizing that when something's new, it's always going to be harder. You're probably not good at video because you didn't go to video class. I really think that there's like this, everyone thinks there's this secret video class that Instagram like held, like behind the scenes, only a few people were invited, and like everyone like got a class on how to create video content, and that everyone else was just like missed out and doesn't know something, and that everyone was just in the loop. But it's like, none of us know what we're doing, and we didn't know what we were doing until we started creating things. And once you start doing it, that's when you start to learn from it. You can improve from it. You can actually start to add things or remove things, and also just build your confidence, because the first time you go live, it's going to be the most terrifying thing ever. You're going to black out. You're going to like get really sweaty. You're probably not going to save it. But like once you do it 100 times, it's going to feel a lot different because you're practicing something new. And it's normal when you're experiencing growth to kind of get those growth pains, right? But I also just think it's a lot of like healing. Like I know Mitzi already said like this is like kind of like therapy, and it really is, because it goes really deep, and like society and things we believe about ourselves really come up when we're like on video of like, this has to be absolutely perfect, or my best piece of content, or it has to be totally different than someone else. Like we put so much pressure on one piece of content, but it's just one piece of content that's going to add to all the content you're going to create and evolve with over a period of time. So I really feel like that has been a few things that have really helped shift for me of I can take up space, I can be myself, and not everything I create has to be totally groundbreaking to be really helpful for people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you don't have to feel like you could write the New York Times bestselling book on this certain topic in order to like show up on video. It's like if you're even just like one or two steps in front of someone, that could help you. So at least for me, I try to think of that person, like who is that person, that and where are they at, or what are they struggling with, and what can I support them with. But it kind of makes me think about like the kind of content we are posting. And I think that's another kind of like blocker people have, is they don't know what to post or how it fits in their broader content strategy. I know for me, I've like go back and forth. I'm like suddenly really focused on posting stuff around business and helping businesses or agency owners. And then sometimes I just want to post like a get ready with me, and sometimes I talk about business and sometimes I don't. So I wonder if you can give us some advice or recommendations on how creators or brands can get past that on not knowing what to post or how to fit it into a content strategy.
Yes. Oh, such a great question. And what I found is the most helpful for this is content pillars. And I know that there's a lot of different approaches to content pillars. And we could probably do an entire podcast episode about it. I've done a podcast episode about it over on my show. But what I found is actually approaching it less of like, I have tons and tons of pillars, like over 10 pillars, right? Like all these different things we can talk about. And then there's like the other side of the spectrum of like, I have to niche down and only talk about video content for the rest of my life, which honestly would be very boring for me and everyone in my community. And instead of those extremes, finding somewhere in the middle, I found 5 is the sweet spot. And so with 5 content pillars, what you're able to do is you're able to have a few pillars that are related to what you're doing, right? What is your specific thing you want to create the most content about as a creator or as a business? What are your offers related to, or your expertise or your industry, right? Those are going to be the obvious ones that come about. But then I also like to have things that are just related to what you do, right? So I'm a video coach for businesses. So I'm going to talk about what it's like to create content as a business, how I run my business, how I sell my offers, what it's like behind the scenes. But then I also like to have kind of like a personal pillar where you can kind of like change and evolve with it. I think when we think pillar, it's like this stone structure that never changes. But actually, I think that our pillars should constantly be evolving as our interests and our own personal selves evolve. And when we're able to map out 5 content pillars that kind of mesh, like, okay, this is our brand and our industry and like what we're an expert at, what we're actually maybe selling or offering on social media, then we have like those related things that are kind of like when we think about the person we're creating content about or the main things we're creating content about, what are those through threads that kind of are related? And then we have like those personal elements of we don't need to share everything, because I actually think social media boundaries are so important on not how often we're on the apps, but what we actually share. You don't have to share your entire personal lives to create content, even as a lifestyle influencer. And so what I found is when we create a balanced content pillar strategy, we're able to give ourselves permission that like, I can post about this interest, but also post about my business, but also talk about the brand that I really love, and also talk about behind the scenes of running my company, right? So all of those things can dance because that's what makes it interesting. And that's what makes us interested about what we're posting about. So I found that approach has really, really helped me find a little bit more balance and get really clear on what I'm actually posting.
Mm-hmm. I love that because I think it like boundaries also like give you permission to like play within them. And I'm curious, like when it comes, like there's a lot of conversations around niches and like what's your niche. And I think maybe sometimes see that as like they can't go away from that. And like you said, it would be really boring and really hard to be consistent if you only talked about one thing. And if we're approaching it with like different content pillars and maybe 5, like how would you define the niche? Is it that through thread that like kind of sits between all of them? Or are you making one like take up more content than the others to kind of like help you round out that niche?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And when I think about the 5 pillars, I actually think that we're not going to always be equally posting about all of them at the same time. And actually, some platforms you might be posting more about some things. Like, for example, your personal pillar might only be on your stories or mainly in your stories, right? And maybe if you have a really educational podcast, maybe 1 or 2 of your pillars might be on your podcast, but maybe not the other ones are going to be represented. So I think instead of trying to find perfect balance in how we're representing our pillars, allow them to kind of support each other and dance with each other. But when it comes to like your niche, this is like what you're an expert at, what you're an authority at, what you want to be known for, and what when people are going to see most of your content, what they're going to see. And that is probably going to take up 1 to 3 of your pillars. So it's definitely going to be a predominant part of your content, but it's not going to be the only thing you're creating content about. And also, on that topic, I like to go a little bit deeper. Instead of just one of my pillars being video content, I like to have more specific of like video marketing strategies for small businesses. Or I like to have like easy tips for creating video content, right? So those things are similar, but definitely different. So it allows me to get a lot more specific, which then allows me to create my own niche and what I'm talking about. So that's kind of the approach I like to go with.
I love it. That's super helpful. Hi, everyone. Just taking a quick pause to tell you about Scan Club. Have you ever felt surprised or unprepared when things change in the world of social media? We felt the same way. We were tired of reacting to constant changes in marketing, algorithms, and consumer behavior, so we found a better way. Scan Club has been our secret weapon for over a year now, and we're excited to finally be sharing it with you. This approach has helped us future-proof our strategies and feel less reactive. It's not a crystal ball, and it doesn't allow us to predict everything, but it's helped us level up our work and collaborate more than ever before. So how does it work? Twice a month, you'll get a copy of Scan Club right to your inbox. It's our breakdown of the top signals we're watching and why they matter. You'll learn to spot these signals, understand their impact, and produce your content with confidence. Get the feature in your inbox, click the link in our description to subscribe today.
Can we talk about platforms next? I feel like
Yes.
for us, one of the biggest mindset shifts we try to help clients with is understanding that less can sometimes be more. Like you don't have to necessarily have to be everywhere all at once and all things to all people, especially as a brand. Do you see many people like business owners or brands or even just creators struggling to figure out where and when to post their content? And if so, how do you help them work through it?
Absolutely. I think to what you were saying, especially with like the big rise of TikTok and kind of just how social media has just been shifting and changing, that we often feel like if we're not on all the platforms that we're missing out and that some are just better than others. But I honestly think that there isn't one right social media platform to be on, and all of them isn't the answer to which, but really just picking one platform and getting consistent from there. I think it's really important to have like a signature platform of like, that's a part of your non-negotiables to help with the overwhelm that we already talked about, of like, this is my platform. This is the one you should know the best, that you like the best. Maybe you're already consuming content on, the one that you know your specific people are on that you're trying to reach, and just focus on getting that one right first. Like pour all of your energy into that one platform. And once you figure out the content you want to create, and maybe you get a little organized with your systems and you're starting to see results with the content you're creating on that platform, then you can add on another platform. And then you can add on another platform. And eventually you might reach a point where you're like, nah, I only need 2. I only need 3. And you can be really happy with the setup that you have. So that's kind of my personal approach, is that like, it's very easy to feel the pressure of being on all the platforms. But even if you had like a full-time social media team, it might not even be physically possible, right? Like it's just a lot to manage. So that would kind of be my approach and how I've approached slowly adding on platform by platform for me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the non-negotiables, because I know you brought it up earlier in our conversation. And I was curious, like, can you walk us through what those are and how you've defined them for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the non-negotiables should be like, what are the easiest things you can do when life happens, when business happens, and when our priorities are just shifting and sometimes we need to focus on other things. Or even when you're like wanting to take a vacation or like take off for the holidays, right? Like we don't have to constantly be on social media. So personally for me, I know Instagram's my main platform and keeping a regular cadence on my podcast. Like those are my main ones that if I'm doing anything else, it's those main things. And for me, I know it's stories. Stories is the thing that's easiest for me. It's fun. It takes me the least amount of time to create. And then I like to just kind of lean into easier types of video content, like using B-roll footage or what I like to call stock content and just creating really easy videos where I don't need to film it. I don't need to create anything new, but I can add text, I can add that footage, and I can still be posting in a regular way, but also repurposing. That's also part of my non-negotiable like formula, I guess you could say, of just like taking content I've already created and how can I give it new life and refreshen it. So that's personally what works for me of like when I don't want to do the social media thing, which happens, I just lean into the things that feel the easiest.
Yeah, starting with what's easy and that feels natural is a great step because I think we can all be so distracted by this shiny new thing. And like there's this pressure, especially if you're a creator or work in social media, to just be like first to adopt something new and kind of like move all your attention there. And there's for sure value in that, but it's like not sustainable. So I love that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, where do you see short form video going in the future?
Oh, such a good question. I feel like with the rise in just hyperfixation with AI, that it's just going to be an absolute requirement that if you're using video, you need to be in your video content. Like be you talking, sharing your ideas. I know we talked about like being yourself, being real, like all of those types of things I think are so essential because there's going to be a point, which I know is already happening, of like people can AI people in videos, right? And the more and more that gets advanced, that like can actually be kind of a bad turn for video. So I think it really requires you to not go the easy way out when it comes to video. Like that little bit of time and effort and energy that goes into creating video content only you can create, that a robot can never replicate, is what is going to help people stand out and really differentiate themselves.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned AI. We have an episode about AI that's coming out next week, which will be live by the time this episode goes out. But basically it was like if you're going to be in marketing and you're not using some AI to support you with your content, then that will be hard for you to keep up, but it's never going to replace you. And I think even as technology evolves and even if we get close to making like AI people look so realistic, it's not going to replace you and your unique, being that comes through video. So I'm really glad that you said that. Okay, we're going to talk about long form.
As someone who's also in the long form space, we talked a lot today about short form video and just short form content in general, but we alluded at the beginning to your podcast. And you've published over 100 episodes, which respect, we haven't got there yet. But what motivates you to keep going with it? What's your experience been? And would you recommend podcasting or other types of long form to other people listening?
Yeah, definitely. I love podcasting and YouTube. I think they're just totally different than other social media platforms. Of like YouTube, you get like that discoverability. And then podcasting is like social media, but not actually social media at all. And there's the audio element. And I just think they're so great. And the two things that have really helped me, and I think the first might be kind of like an unpopular take, but when I started my podcast for the first few years, I was only doing every other week. Like I was never doing weekly. And also for YouTube, same thing, every other week. I never really got to weekly, still to this day. And I feel like that really helped me understand this is my capacity on how much long form content I can create. And I'm not trying to push past that boundary. And so I think when you're starting something new, there's often this pressure of like, you have to crank out as much content as possible for it to be worth your time. But instead, I really focused on how can I be very consistent at this platform? So in 3-4 years, I'm still on it, right? So that was really, really helpful for me. And the other thing is just being really thoughtful with how I'm repurposing and reusing things. So what I've been doing is I will take something like a podcast episode and turn it into a YouTube video, or I will take a YouTube video and turn it into short form content or emails. So even though all of my platforms that you're on, you're going to get a different content experience, like I'm not literally copying and pasting everything. I'm taking that long form content, right, which is like chunky. There's like a lot of things in it, and I'm like turning into other content. So those two things have made long form really work really well for my content strategy for the long haul.
One question we'd like to ask every guest, and I'm really excited to hear your answer, is in your opinion, who right now is making waves and why?
Oh, this is so good. I think it's just top of mind because I'm reading her book, but Berna Anat, she's kind of like a financial hype woman. That's what she calls herself. And I've been following her on social media for so long. I'm just like an amazing resource for financial resources and help, specifically for like people of color and underrepresented communities in the financial space. And I've been loving her book because I literally can like hear her yelling at me in the book because I've been following her with her content so much. And so I think that's such a great example of someone who's making waves, of like someone who's like just started on social media creating this like really fun and spunky content around this is my financial journey of like trying to not be broke and be debt free. And now for it to be like in a book where I'm able to like experience her brand in a totally different way, but still feel like, oh, that's the same person that I see a reel from, I think has been really, really cool to see like creators now entering this like author TV show role. I think is just so inspiring and very telling to what's going to be the future for creators as well.
It's so cool. I'm definitely going to look her up. She sounds awesome.
Can you say her name one more time? Sorry.
Berna Anat.
Awesome. We're going to make sure that's in the show notes too.
And then the final question we have for you is, how can listeners connect with you? Let's plug your podcast, your social, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can listen to the Shine Online podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast. A really great place to start is my Back to Basics series, where I talked about things like posting plan, content pillars, a few of the things that we've touched on here. And of course, on social media at Shine with Natasha, wherever you're doing the social things. And then a really great free resource that might help you if you're just wanting to create more video content is my free Video Confidence Challenge. It shows you how I source my B-roll footage and how I use it in creative ways. So definitely check that out as well.
This has been such a great conversation, Natasha. Thank you for really just unpacking the like fullness of your experience and all the value that you bring to your clients. We're going to have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, it's so fun to have you. Thanks for being on.
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Waves. If you enjoyed this episode, you can hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, or give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to follow along on social at Hello Arcade, and we will see you next time.